Hello everyone, my name is Karina Elias Hernandez and today I'll be presenting about the importance of increasing support in schools for type 1 diabetic adolescents. First, we'll cover some diabetes basics, the obstacles diabetic teenagers face, the current approaches of managing diabetes at school, and my proposal for combating this situation. I'll end with a personal story to emphasize the importance of providing more support for type 1 diabetic teens at school. Before we begin at looking into the lack of support offered to diabetic teenagers, let's take a moment to go over what diabetes is, some typical symptoms, how this condition is managed, and complications that may arise if diabetes isn't properly treated. Glucose is the body's main source of energy. We obtain glucose from all of the food we eat. In a healthy individual, beta cells in the pancreas produce the hormone insulin, which allows glucose to move into our cells. Insulin is like a key that opens up specific channels on a cell's surface. This allows the glucose to enter inside of the cell and become metabolized into energy. In a type 1 diabetic individual, one's own immune system destroys these insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. Without insulin, the glucose cannot move into the cell and cannot be used as energy. This leads to a state of hyperglycemia, or high levels of glucose in the blood. Type 1 diabetes is most often diagnosed in childhood and young adulthood, though it can develop at any stage of life. The most common symptoms of type 1 diabetes include unexplained weight loss, extreme tiredness, increased hunger, excessive thirst, frequent urination, tingling and numbness in the feet and hands, blurred vision, unhealed wounds, and urine that attracts ants. This last one might seem a little strange, but without insulin, the body is unable to use the glucose in the blood, thus it is expelled through the urine, causing the urine to be sweet. In many cases, these symptoms go unnoticed until the patient is in a state of diabetic ketoacidosis. This is when the body has been deprived of insulin for so long that fat cells are used for energy instead of glucose. Ketones are a byproduct of this metabolic process, causing the blood to become more acidic as they accumulate. Flu-like symptoms result from the extreme acidity in the blood. In serious cases, this can lead to a diabetic coma and even death. Diabetic ketoacidosis is most common upon initial diagnosis. However, a diabetic patient runs the risk of falling into the state whenever blood sugar levels have been elevated for long periods of time. According to the latest National Diabetes Statistic Report published last year, based on the data collected in 2015, there are an estimated 193,000 children and adolescents younger than age 20 years old who have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This is equivalent to 0.24% of the total U.S. population younger than 20 years old. Once a type 1 diabetes diagnosis has been confirmed through a series of blood and urine tests, the patient will immediately begin insulin therapy to manage blood sugar levels. Insulin may be administered via syringe, insulin pump, or insulin pen. This, along with frequent blood glucose monitoring, increased exercise, and rigorous carbohydrate counting, allows for type 1 diabetics to lead long, healthy lives. Though a healthy lifestyle can be achieved, there are also some serious complications associated with uncontrolled diabetes management. As mentioned earlier, a diabetic can slip into a state of ketoacidosis, which can result into a coma or even death. Neuropathy or nerve damage can cause a reduced ability to feel pain, heat, and cold. If a diabetic with neuropathy develops a wound, especially on the feet, this may go unnoticed due to the lack of nerve sensations. The wound could become infected, which could lead to limb loss if the infection is severe and medications are no longer effective. Other complications of diabetes include nephropathy, which is kidney disease, high blood pressure, stroke, and eye complications that could lead to blindness. The complications listed here are all caused by the excess glucose in the blood, which damages the nerve and blood vessels in the body. Before a diabetic child or teen returns to school, the doctor should provide written documentation outlining insulin dosages, carbohydrate meal amounts, and protocols for high or low blood sugars at school. Since type 1 diabetes is recognized as a disability under federal disability acts, the school may establish written accommodations and care plans through either a Section 504 plan or an individualized education program to ensure all diabetic and educational needs are recognized and met. To provide a safe environment for the student at school, staff who will interact with that student will receive basic diabetes training. A school nurse or another appointed individual will help the student check their blood sugar and administer insulin if needed at school. A school counselor may also provide check-ins in order to offset any social-emotional needs that may arise. As diabetic students advance in their school career, the support they were once offered in school decreases. Young, school-aged children with type 1 diabetes are offered ample support at school as they are unable to manage their diabetes independently. This support decreases as students move into middle school and high school. Teens are given the responsibility of checking their own blood sugars, monitoring their carbohydrate intake, and administering their insulin according to the protocol set in place by their doctor. It is assumed that teenage diabetic students are able to manage their diabetes more efficiently than an elementary-age student could. Thus, most of these supports are removed. The premature transfer of responsibilities from parent to child, along with the decreased support at school, causes the effects from increased peer pressure, depression, and declining academic performance to be heightened. All of this leads to poor glucose control, and the student is placed at higher risk for complications later in life. Diabetic children and teenagers feel a constant pressure to fit in with their peers, so much so that they hide their diabetes at school. It has been noted that about 25% of children hide their diabetes at school, with that percent rising to 36% by the time they enter high school. Diabetic teens don't want to draw attention to themselves, resulting in missed insulin shots, skipped blood glucose testing, and eating an unbalanced, unhealthy, and carb-heavy diet in order to feel like everyone else. The pressure of feeling like other teens can lead to poor glucose control and treatment adherence. Poor diabetic control has also been correlated to a decreased academic performance among teens with type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetic students perform within an average range on general intelligence tests, yet struggle in school. One reason may be that teens with poor diabetic control tend to have more school absences. Diabetes is considered an autoimmune condition since the immune system is responsible for destroying the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. Type 1 diabetics are left with a weakened immune system and are highly susceptible to getting sick often. When students miss school, they also miss assignments and can fall behind as a result of all of the missed school. Over long periods of time, uncontrolled blood glucose levels can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, which requires hospital treatments. This leads to more school absences and even worse academic performance. Another obstacle faced by type 1 diabetic teenagers is depression. Around 9.5% of all adolescents suffer depression at one point or another. Adolescents with type 1 diabetes are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from depression compared to the rest of the adolescent population. Without a supportive and trusting person the teen can count on, depression can continue to consume his or her life. It has been noted that depression can further negatively impact diabetic control by decreasing the frequency teens check their blood glucose levels and increasing the number of serious hospitalizations. Currently, school nurses are given the main responsibility of managing diabetic students in public schools. However, one main cause of the decreased support offered to diabetic adolescents in schools is the lack of funding. On top of that, nurses are bombarded with large caseloads and tend to spend more of their resources and time on younger students who are not yet independent. Thus, students are unable to offer continuous social-emotional support the diabetic adolescents require, seeing as how they have many obligations within the school district. It was found that as of March 2016, over half of public school districts in the United States were without a full-time school nurse. In some areas of the country, there are 4,000 students being served by only one school nurse. It is impossible for one nurse to properly serve 4,000 students and offer social emotional support to diabetic teens throughout the day, especially when these teens are thought to be independent by the time they get to high school. The lack of nursing staff available to work with diabetes students is said to be remedied by offering teachers and staff members basic diabetes training. These trainings usually provide a foundation of what diabetes is, what signs and symptoms to be aware of with both high and low blood sugars, and what to do in case of a severe emergency. Though this information is crucial for teachers and staff members who interact with diabetic students throughout the school day, it would be implausible and unethical to expect staff members to offer social emotional support. They do not have the required education or training needed to offer this type of support, nor is it their duty. In order to review the effectiveness of current approaches, one study surveyed 499 parents with type 1 diabetic children between the ages of 3 and 18 years old. It was found that only 34% of parents felt confident that staff members working with their children could accurately identify the symptoms of a low blood sugar. This is extremely concerning because students spend about 1/3 of their day at school. Missing the signs of a low blood sugar could result in the student passing out and slipping into a diabetic coma. 17% of parents surveyed reported problems with maintaining open communication between home and school, and many felt that they had to modify glucose monitoring and insulin treatment due to the lack of support they felt at school. Traditionally, child life programs have been found in hospitals. However, partnerships with schools are increasing. Introducing child life programs into schools in partnership with local hospitals would help provide social emotional support to diabetic teenagers, seeing as how they are often deprived of these services. This partnership should ideally begin in the hospital upon the initial diagnosis and continue through the adolescent's final years of school. In the best case scenario, the same child life specialist would work with the student and their family throughout the entire academic career. Participating school districts and hospitals would fund this program primarily through grants. Since health insurances typically do not cover child life services, schools and hospitals interested in this type of partnership would have to find alternative ways to fund the program. Having a dedicated person appointed to nurture this trusting relationship with the student and their family would help reduce the risk of depression and academic obstacles, while offering effective coping strategies to overcome some of the peer pressures of fitting in. Some school districts with only a few diabetic students may find this resource unnecessary. However, if there is a small number of diabetic students in one school district, this service could be extended to serve multiple school districts in the area. Additionally, child life specialists could also provide these types of supports for other students and families facing medical obstacles. This doesn't have to be only for diabetic students. Child life specialists in schools would have many components to their role in helping diabetic adolescents and their families. Primarily, the child life specialist would offer continuous social emotional support beginning at the time of diagnosis in the hospital. If they did not have the available services or resources, they would work closely with community partners to provide all supports necessary to allow that student to thrive. Since teens are easily influenced by their peers, a child life specialist would help facilitate a stronger support system at school by including the teen's friends onto the management team. Instead of hiding their diabetes, a diabetic adolescent could find strength and support by having their friends on their side. A new diabetes diagnosis affects the entire family unit, not just the affected individual. Siblings are often left out of the equation with regard to their brother or sister's diabetes. A child life specialist could work with siblings to help answer questions and provide support for them as well. A unique task a child life specialist could take on would be to organize support groups for diabetic students and their families. This would help build a stronger community within the school and school district. This would also help the teen and their family feel like they are not in the constant battle against diabetes on their own. One crucial responsibility of the child life specialist would be to facilitate the transition between hospitalizations and the school, in hopes of helping the student stay caught up with their schoolwork. The child life specialist would be an advocate for the child in the hospital room and the classroom to ensure all of their medical and educational needs are being met. I'd like to wrap up this presentation with a personal story to emphasize the importance of increasing support to diabetic teenagers. In the summer of 2002, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I was only 9 years old. This was a complete surprise, seeing as how no one in my family had ever been diagnosed with diabetes. It all started one July morning when my mom took me to see my doctor. She thought I had a kidney infection because I had been waken up frequently at night to use the restroom. The doctor was shocked when the urine analysis came back and my glucose level was well into the 700s. A normal level should be less than 120. We were immediately rushed to the Children's Hospital about an hour away, where I was hospitalized for a week and a half. We were forced to stay for so long, not because I was severely ill, like other kids when they're diagnosed, but because my parents spoke limited English and we had to work around the interpreter's schedule. During this time, I was left in the dark, often being forced to leave the room while my parents received the diabetic training required before we could go home. I was eventually discharged with a backpack full of books, measuring utensils, and brochures that my mom would carry around with her everywhere we went for the next 2 years. Come September, I was ready to start the 4th grade. During those last 2 years of elementary school, I received a great deal of support from my teachers, the secretary staff in the office, the school counselor, and especially the school nurse. She would check and monitor my blood glucose levels 3 to 4 days a week before lunchtime. If she was unavailable, the secretary would ensure I was doing everything properly. My mom even packed my lunch every single day with perfectly proportioned meals. My glucose levels were fairly under control during this time. This all changed when I moved on to middle school and high school. In middle school, I only met with the school counselor a handful of times, and it was only really when I requested the check-ins. I also only saw the school nurse a few times a year, if that. All of a sudden, I was in charge of managing my diabetes at school completely on my own. My mom stopped packing my lunch, and it was up to me to count the carbs in my meals. The secretary in middle school would unlock the cabinet for me to get my glucose meter out, but that was it. She never ensured I actually checked my sugar level or administered my insulin. In high school, I was given the option to carry around my supplies and was never monitored by any adults throughout the day. I don't even remember talking to the school nurse during the 4 years of high school with regards to my diabetes. The transition during freshman year was especially rough because, like many teenagers, I was more worried about fitting in. I didn't want anyone to know I was diabetic, so I pretended I wasn't. I would constantly skip insulin shots, go days without checking my blood sugars, and eat way too much junk food. I fell into diabetic ketoacidosis at least 5 times that year, which led to week-long hospitalizations every time. For months, I struggled with depression, but no one was really aware of what was going on or the dangerous path I was on. It wasn't until that final hospitalization that year that I was forced to talk to a counselor and everything came to light. After that, I was able to receive more social emotional support, and the final years of high school were much better. If I had had a trusting, consistent adult monitoring me and offering me support, even when it was assumed I could manage my diabetes on my own, it may have prevented the hospitalizations and depression I experienced in high school. Even better yet, if a child life specialist would have been present at the time of my initial diagnosis to explain to me what was going on, and the same specialist was able to work with me throughout my educational career, I may have been better equipped with more coping strategies. A child life specialist could have worked with me, my family, my friends, and my teachers to build a stronger support system in all aspects of my life to minimize the negative effects my diabetes had on me in high school. In summary, adolescents with type 1 diabetes feel pressured to hide their condition to feel accepted by their peers. They tend to struggle academically due to poor diabetes management, which leads to an increased absent rate. Diabetic teens are also at a higher risk of becoming depressed compared to their peers. The current lack of funding does not allow school nurses to focus their attention on the social-emotional needs of diabetic students. Despite basic diabetes training efforts, no one is specifically appointed to address the needs of diabetic adolescents. Introducing child life programs into schools would provide the continuous social-emotional support that diabetic adolescents are currently lacking. Child life specialists could build relationships with these teens to help increase their self-acceptance rates while reducing the episodes of depression. As a result of a better emotional state and improved diabetes management, diabetic teenagers would be in school more often because they would be getting sick less often. They could also achieve better academic performance as a result of being in school. This proposal would help reduce the pressure felt by school nurses to be the sole care managers at school, while offering diabetic adolescents the support they need to thrive throughout their school career. It is very clear to see that introducing child life specialty into schools in partnership with local hospitals would greatly benefit our diabetic children, adolescents, and families who are currently being underserved in our schools. Like most of you, I am just a few weeks away from hopefully obtaining my master's degree. From here, my next step is to complete a child life internship and become a certified child life specialist. Maybe one day I will have the opportunity to fill this missing role in our school system and be able to support diabetic students and families. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Good luck to all of you with these last few weeks of class.